My son thought he was tracking a senile old man who was losing his grip on reality. He did not realize he was playing a game of cat and mouse with a retired military logistics engineer who spent 30 years moving high-value assets through hostile territories without leaving a trace. When I found the GPS tracker hidden under my '68 Mustang, I did not get angry, and I did not call him to ask why. I simply peeled the magnetic device off the chassis, walked into a FedEx office, and overnighted it to a fishing buddy in Vancouver, Canada. 12 hours later, my phone rang, and the sheer terror in my son's voice told me everything I needed to know. I was no longer just a father. I was a target. But he was about to learn the hard way that you never hunt a man who knows how to vanish. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated your intelligence. It started on a rainy Tuesday in Seattle, the kind of gray, relentless drizzle that seeps into your bones. I was in my garage polishing the chrome bumper of my 1968 Ford Mustang. That car is not just a vehicle to me. It is a time capsule. I bought it the week I returned from my second tour overseas, and I have maintained every bolt, every hose, and every wire with my own 2 hands for 40 years. I heard the gravel crunch in the driveway. It was Brandon. My son usually only visits on holidays or when he needs a signature for something trivial, so a Tuesday afternoon visit was already a red flag. I watched him through the garage window before I opened the door. He was sitting in his leased BMW, checking his hair in the rearview mirror, wiping sweat from his forehead, even though it was 50 degrees outside. He looked like a man rehearsing a lie. When he finally walked in, he was wearing that fake salesman smile that he must have picked up from his job as a venture capital broker. He hugged me, but it was stiff. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale cigarettes. "Hey, Dad," he said. His voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I would check on you. How is the beast running?" He pointed to the Mustang. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and looked him dead in the eye. "She runs fine, Brandon. Better than most new cars." "Why do you ask?" He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Well, you know these old cars are death traps, Dad. The brakes go, the steering locks up. I was actually reading a report about axle failures in this model year. It got me worried. I would hate for you to be driving on the highway and have something snap." I took a sip of my black coffee. "I know every inch of this car. The axle is fine. Let me just take a look," he insisted, already moving toward the vehicle. "I took a mechanics course a few years ago, remember? Let me just slide under and check the rear differential. It will give me peace of mind." I let him do it. Not because I trusted him, but because I wanted to see what he was up to. A man who has never changed his own oil does not suddenly care about rear differentials. He grabbed a creeper and slid under the rear of the car. He was down there for a long time. 10 minutes. I stood by the workbench listening. I did not hear the clinking of wrenches or the sound of someone testing metal. I heard the soft, distinct click of a magnet attaching to steel. When he slid back out, his shirt was dirty, but he looked relieved. "Looks okay for now, Dad," he said, dusting himself off. "But you really should be careful. Actually, maybe you should not drive it for a few days, just to be safe." He left as quickly as he arrived, declining my offer of a sandwich. He practically ran to his car. As I watched his taillights disappear down the wet road, the silence of the house returned. I am 69 years old. Most people look at me and see a pensioner living on Social Security. They see the flannel shirts, the modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, the calloused hands. They think I am simple. They think I am slow. Brandon thinks I live check to check. He thinks the only thing I have of value is this house and this car. He does not know about the 3 commercial warehouses I own near the port. He does not know about the $4 million investment portfolio I built over 40 years of disciplined saving and shrewd logistics consulting. I never told him. I never told anyone. In my world, wealth is like ammunition. You keep it hidden until you need to use it. And standing there in that cold garage, I had a feeling I was going to need it soon. I locked the garage door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I grabbed my high lift jack. I raised the rear of the Mustang, secured it on stands, and slid under the chassis on the same creeper my son had used. I did not need to look for long. It was tucked high inside the rear wheel well, hidden behind the shock absorber. A black rectangular box about the size of a deck of cards. It was a high-end GPS tracker, the kind with a strong magnet and a battery life that could last for weeks. It was blinking a faint red light, transmitting my location in real time. I stared at it, and the cold metal of the car seeped into my back. My own son. He was tracking me like I was a stolen package. Why was he worried about my safety? No. You do not track someone you are worried about without telling them. You track someone you want to control. You track someone you are planning to corner. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. Panic is for amateurs. Strategy is for professionals. If I confronted him now, he would deny it. He would say he was just trying to protect his senile old dad. He would gaslight me. No. I needed to know the end game. I needed to see how far he was willing to go. I reached up and pulled the device free. It came off with a solid snap. I held it in my hand, weighing it. It was heavy, expensive. I climbed out from under the car and set the device on my workbench. I looked at it, and then I looked at the calendar on the wall. If he wants to know where I am, I whispered to the empty room, let's give him a trip to remember. I went into the house and grabbed a small cardboard box. I wrapped the tracker in bubble wrap, keeping it active. I drove my wife's old SUV, the one he didn't check, to the FedEx center 3 towns over. I did not want to use the local one where everyone knows my name. I walked up to the counter. The clerk was a young kid, bored, chewing gum. I need to ship this priority overnight, I said. Where to? He asked. Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, I replied. He typed it in. Contents, fishing real parts. I lied without blinking. I gave him the address of an old army buddy of mine, a guy named Jim, who runs a charter boat business out of the Vancouver harbor. I had already texted Jim. I told him I was sending him a package and that he should take it out on his boat the next morning, way out into the strait, and then maybe toss it into a dumpster on the docks a few days later. Jim didn't ask questions. We served in unit together. We do not ask questions. I paid $45 for the shipping. It was the best money I ever spent. I drove home, parked the Mustang exactly where it had been, and waited. I made dinner. I watched the news. I went to bed at my usual time. I slept soundly, knowing that at that very moment, a little black box was traveling north on a cargo plane crossing an international border, carrying my son's peace of mind with it. The phone rang at 7 a.m. sharp the next morning. I was in the kitchen, buttering my toast, listening to the rain drum against the window. I let it ring twice before picking up. I cleared my throat to sound groggy like an old man just waking up. Hello, I said. Dad Brandon's voice exploded through the speaker. He was screaming. He sounded breathless, hysterical. Dad, where are you? Are you okay? I took a slow bite of my toast. I am in the kitchen, Brandon. I am having breakfast. Why are you shouting? You are at home, you are sure. Did you go out last night? Did you drive the Mustang? I frowned, leaning back in my chair. No, son. I slept all night. The car is in the garage. What is going on, Ed? Listen to me, he stammered, and I could hear the panic rising in his throat. The police just called me. They said they spotted your car. They said it was crossing the border into Canada. They think you might have been kidnapped or maybe you drove there and forgot. I almost smiled. It was such a clumsy lie. The police do not call the son of a car owner because a car crosses a border unless that car has been reported stolen, which it hadn't. And they certainly do not call at 7 in the morning to speculate about kidnapping. He was watching the tracker app on his phone. He saw the dot moving north, crossing the border, and he was losing his mind. "Brandon, that is ridiculous," I said calmly. "Go look in the garage if you want. The car is right here. Maybe the police made a mistake." "No!" he yelled, and then he lowered his voice, trying to regain control. "No, Dad. Look, maybe someone stole it and you didn't notice I am coming over. Do not go anywhere. Do not open the door for anyone. I will be there in 20 minutes. He was about to hang up, but he fumbled the phone. He must have thought he hit the end call button, but the line stayed open. I held the receiver tight against my ear. I heard rustling like he was throwing the phone onto a car seat. And then I heard another voice. It was not Brandon. It was deep, gravelly, and terrifyingly calm. "You said the old man was home," the stranger's voice said. "He is," Brandon's voice was distant, muffled. "I swear he is. The tracker must be glitching. It says he is in Canada, but he says he is in the kitchen. If that car isn't here in 1 hour," the voice said, low and dangerous, "you better start digging a grave. Not for him. For you." Then the line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. My hand was shaking just a little. This was not just about control. This was not just about an inheritance. My son had not just put a tracker on my car. He had promised my car, and possibly my entire life, to someone very dangerous. I looked out the window at the gray Seattle sky. I had about 20 minutes before Brandon arrived. 20 minutes to change the game. I put down my toast. I was not hungry anymore. I walked out to the garage past the Mustang that was sitting innocently on the concrete. I needed to see what else was in that car. I popped the trunk. It was empty, just the spare tire and a jack. But then I noticed the carpet lining. It was loose in the corner. I pulled it back. Taped to the metal floor of the trunk was a thick plastic sealed envelope. I ripped it open. Inside were papers, loan documents, high-interest short-term promissory notes. And there at the bottom, a title transfer document for my house. My signature was on it, forged in blue ink. I read the terms. $50,000 cash advance. Collateral 1, 1968 Ford Mustang. Secondary collateral, residential property at 42 Evergreen Terrace. My house. My son had borrowed money from sharks, and he had put up my life as the collateral. And today was the collection day. I heard a siren in the distance. I looked at the papers in my hand. I did not have a son anymore. I had an enemy. And in war, you do not wait for the enemy to breach the gate. You burn the bridge while he is still standing on it. I grabbed the papers. I grabbed my go-bag, which I have kept packed since 1985. I got into my wife's SUV, backed out of the driveway, and drove away. I did not wait for Brandon. By the time he pulled into my driveway, I would be a ghost. The silence of a Seattle morning is deceptive. I sat at my kitchen table, the ceramic mug warming my hands, watching the relentless gray rain streak the window pane. My wife's old SUV was parked in the driveway, invisible to the world, just like me. But my 1968 Mustang, the car my son was so desperate to check yesterday, was technically 300 miles north, crossing the border into British Columbia in a cardboard box. I checked my watch. 700 hours. Right on schedule. The phone on the table vibrated, dancing across the wood, shattering the quiet. The screen lit up with his name. Brandon. I did not answer on the first ring. I let it go to the second, then the third. Panic needs time to ferment. When I finally slid the icon to answer, I didn't even get a word out. His voice tore through the speaker, high-pitched and ragged, the sound of a man watching his life crumble in real time. "Dad, answer me, where are you?" The sheer volume made me pull the phone away from my ear. He sounded breathless, hysterical, like he had just run a marathon or was staring down the barrel of a gun. I took a slow sip of coffee, black, no sugar. I am right here, Brandon. I am in the kitchen. I am having breakfast. Why are you shouting? It was the calmest I had ever sounded, and I knew it infuriated him. He stammered, breathless. The police, Dad. The police just called me. They picked up a signal. They said your Mustang just crossed the border into Canada. They think you might have been kidnapped, or maybe you drove there and forgot Dad. Are you sure you are home? I didn't say anything for a moment. I just let the lie hang there in the air, heavy and stupid. I spent 30 years in logistics working with military police and federal agencies. I know protocol. The police do not call a grown man's son at the crack of dawn because a car crossed a border unless there is a body inside it, or it has been reported stolen. And I certainly had not reported it stolen. There was no police call. There was only Brandon staring at a tracking app on his smartphone, watching a little red dot move further and further away from where he needed it to be. He wasn't worried about me. He was terrified that his asset was leaving the country. Brandon, that is ridiculous, I said, keeping my voice steady, playing the part of the confused senior. Go look in the garage if you want. The car is right here. Maybe the police made a mistake. No, he yelled, his voice cracking. No, Dad, look, maybe someone stole it, and you didn't notice he was unraveling. The narrative he had constructed was falling apart. He needed me to be the senile old man who wandered off, but the GPS data was contradicting his reality. If the tracker was in Canada, but I was on the phone in my kitchen, he had to make a choice. Believe the technology or believe his father. And for Brandon, money and technology were the only gods he worshipped. I am coming over, he rushed out, the words tumbling over each other. Do not go anywhere. Do not open the door for anyone. I will be there in 20 minutes. Just stay by the car. He was about to hang up, but his hands must have been shaking. He fumbled the phone. He must have thought he hit the end call button, or maybe he just lowered it to his side in frustration, but the line stayed open. I held the receiver tight against my ear, pressing it so hard it hurt. The connection was still live. I heard rustling like he was throwing the phone onto a car seat. And then I heard another voice. It was not Brandon. It was deep, gravelly, and terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a man who does not make threats, but promises. You said the old man was home, the stranger's voice said. It came through faint but crystal clear against the background hum of the call. He is, Brandon's voice was distant, muffled, pleading. I swear he is. The tracker must be glitching. It says he is in Canada, but he says he is in the kitchen. I don't know what is happening. There was a pause, a silence so heavy I could feel it through the cellular network. Then the stranger spoke again. If that car isn't here in 1 hour, you better start digging a grave. Not for him. For you. Then the line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, almost like an angry insect. My hand was shaking just a little. I set the phone down on the table next to my half-eaten toast. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This wasn't about inheritance. This wasn't about controlling a senile father or trying to get power of attorney to sell my house for a quick profit. This was survival. My son had not just put a tracker on my car. He had borrowed money from people who do not use collection agencies. They use sledgehammers and shallow graves. My 1968 Mustang wasn't just a classic car to them. It was a down payment. It was collateral. And the tracking device I had peeled off and mailed to Canada. That was the only thing keeping them from breaking his legs right now. But the clock was ticking. I looked out the window at the gray Seattle sky. I had about 20 minutes before Brandon arrived. 20 minutes to change the game. I put down my toast. I was not hungry anymore. I walked out to the garage past the empty space where the Mustang usually sat and looked at the pile of documents I had pulled from the trunk just minutes before the call. The loan documents, the high-interest promissory notes, and there at the bottom, the title transfer document for my house. My signature was on it, forged in blue ink. $50,000 cash advance. Collateral 1, 1968 Ford Mustang. Secondary collateral residential property at 42 Evergreen Terrace, my house. My son had borrowed money from sharks, and he had put up my life as the collateral. And today was the collection day. He wasn't coming to check on me. He was coming to take the car to save his own skin, and if the car wasn't there, he would take the house. Or he would take me. I heard a siren in the distance wailing through the rain. I looked at the papers in my hand. I did not have a son anymore. I had an enemy. A desperate, cornered enemy who had just been given a death sentence by a man with a gravelly voice. And in war, you do not wait for the enemy to breach the gate. You burn the bridge while he is still standing on it. I grabbed the papers. I grabbed my go-bag, a tactical duffel I have kept packed since 1985, with cash passports and hard drives. I walked out to my wife's SUV. I threw the bag in the passenger seat. I did not wait for Brandon. I did not write a note. By the time he pulled into my driveway with his handlers, I would be a ghost. I turned the key, the engine roared to life, and I backed out into the rain, leaving the life I knew behind. The game had just begun. The line went dead, and the silence that followed was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. I looked at my watch. I had 19 minutes. Maybe 18 if Brandon was speeding, which he undoubtedly was. A man who thinks his life is about to end does not obey speed limits. I did not panic. Panic is a luxury for people who have someone coming to save them. I had no one. I put the phone in my pocket and walked out the back door, crossing the small patch of wet grass to the detached garage. The rain was falling harder now, a cold, steady drumbeat that masked the sound of my footsteps. Inside the garage, the air was still and smelled of oil rubber and cold steel. The Mustang sat there under the fluorescent lights gleaming in its candy apple red paint. It was a beautiful machine, a piece of American history that I had restored with my own hands. I ran my hand along the rear fender. Yesterday, my son had been down here supposedly checking the differential. He hadn't been fixing anything. He had been tagging an asset. I needed to know why. A tracker is one thing. A death threat from a stranger on the phone is another. There was something else in this car. I knew it. Brandon wasn't smart enough to be a spy, but he was desperate enough to be a mule. I thought about drugs first. A kilo of something taped inside the door panels or stuffed in the spare tire well. It would explain the panic. It would explain the thugs. I popped the trunk. It was clean. Just the jack, the spare tire, and a small toolbox I kept for roadside emergencies. I ran my hands over the carpet lining. It felt normal. I lifted the spare tire cover. Nothing. I started checking the wheel wells from the inside. Nothing. Then I saw it. It was subtle, something a civilian would miss, but not someone who spent 20 years inspecting cargo for contraband. The carpet on the floor of the trunk, right up against the back of the rear seats, was slightly raised. Not much. Maybe 1/8 of an inch. But the seam wasn't straight. I pulled out my pocket knife and wedged it under the carpet edge. I pried it up. The adhesive gave way with a tearing sound. Beneath the carpet, taped directly to the metal floor pan with heavy-duty duct tape, was a thick, flat package wrapped in clear, vacuum-sealed plastic. I cut the tape and pulled the package out. It wasn't drugs. It was too flat, too rigid. It was documents. I sliced the plastic open and slid the contents out onto the workbench. It was a stack of legal papers, perhaps 30 pages thick. The header on the first page was bold and aggressive: Viper Holdings, LLC, High-Risk Asset Financing. I started reading. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, the clauses, the interest rates that bordered on criminal. It was a loan agreement, a secured promissory note. I flipped to the signature page. There it was in blue ink. Wallace King. It was my name. It was my signature. Or at least it was a very good copy of it. He must have traced it from an old birthday card or a check I had given him years ago. I flipped back to the first page to see the amount. My breath caught in my throat. $500,000. $500,000. I felt a wave of nausea, not from fear, but from the sheer scale of the betrayal. Brandon hadn't just borrowed a few grand to cover a gambling debt. He had leveraged my entire existence. I looked at the collateral section. Item A, 1968 Ford Mustang VIN number, matching the car standing 3 feet away from me. Estimated value, $85,000. Item B, residential property located at 42 Evergreen Terrace. My house, my home, the place where I lived with his mother for 30 years, the place where I raised him. The terms were brutal. It was a short-term bridge loan effective for 90 days. And then I saw the clause that made the blood drain from my face. It was highlighted in yellow, likely by the loan shark to make sure my idiot son understood the stakes. Default Clause 4.2, failure to repay the principal in full by the maturation date will result in immediate surrender of collateral item A. If collateral item A is not surrendered in operational condition by 12 p.m. on the 15th of November, the lender reserves the right to execute the pre-signed quitclaim deed for collateral item B. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Today was November 15th. It wasn't just a deadline. It was the deadline. That's why he was here yesterday. He wasn't checking the car for safety. He was verifying the asset before he handed it over. He had sold my car to pay the interest, and if the car wasn't handed over by noon today, they were going to take my house. He had forged a quitclaim deed. He had signed my house away to a shell company run by Russian mobsters. The voice on the phone made sense now. Start digging a grave. They weren't kidding. If the car wasn't there, they took the house. If they couldn't take the house because I was there fighting it, they would remove me. I looked at the car. It was no longer a vehicle. It was a coffin. I checked my watch again. 12 minutes. I made a decision instantly. I did not have time to call the police. The police would take hours to file a report. They would ask questions. They would want to talk to Brandon. And while we were doing paperwork, Viper Holdings would be sending a cleanup crew to secure their new property. No. I needed to be unreachable. I needed to be a ghost. I grabbed the thick stack of loan documents and shoved them into my jacket. These were my leverage. These were the proof of fraud. As long as I held these and as long as I was alive to testify that the signature was a forgery, their claim on my house was messy. It was contested. If I disappeared or if I died in an accident today, the paperwork would go through smoothly. I walked out of the garage and locked the heavy side door. I didn't go back into the house. I had my go bag in the passenger seat of my wife's old 2010 Ford Explorer. It was beat up and visible, and most importantly, it had never been of interest to Brandon. He wouldn't have put a tracker on a car worth $3,000. I climbed into the driver's seat. I didn't turn on the headlights. I started the engine and the old V6 rumbled to life. I backed out of the driveway, the tires crunching softly on the wet leaves. As I pulled onto the street, I saw a black Range Rover turn the corner 2 blocks down, moving fast. It was Brandon. I recognized the aggressive way he took the turn. He was bringing his handlers. He was bringing the people who were going to take my car and leave me homeless. I didn't speed up. I didn't draw attention. I turned right away from him and slipped into the morning traffic of the suburban sprawl. By the time he pulled into my driveway and found the house empty and the garage locked, I would be 5 miles away. I wasn't Wallace King, the retired father, anymore. I was a phantom, and I was going to war. The rain in Seattle provides a specific kind of cover. It washes away colors, blurs outlines, and makes everyone keep their head down. I drove my wife's old Explorer into the heart of downtown, parking it in a long-term garage 3 blocks away from my destination. I pulled my collar up and walked into the lobby of the Warwick Hotel. It was not the most expensive place in the city, but it was solid anonymous and full of business travelers who did not ask questions. I approached the front desk. I did not use my credit cards. Credit cards leave a digital trail that a desperate stockbroker's son could trace in 5 minutes. I placed a stack of hundreds on the counter. "Room for 3 nights," I said. "Name is Arthur. Arthur is my middle name. It is on my birth certificate, but I haven't used it since 1972. The clerk counted the cash, handed me a key card, and went back to his computer. To him, I was just another gray-haired man in a raincoat. To the world outside those glass doors, I was beginning to vanish. I took the elevator to the 14th floor. The room was standard. Beige walls, a view of the Space Needle shrouded in mist, and a desk. That was all I needed. I set up my laptop, not connecting to the hotel Wi-Fi, but tethering it to a secure encrypted hotspot I kept in my go bag. I was not checking emails. I was activating a listening post. This was the part Brandon did not know about. He thought he was the only one playing spy games. A month ago, I had come out of the shower to find him standing in my bedroom holding my wallet. He claimed he was looking for a few bucks for pizza, but his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped rat. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture him. The next day, I bought a high-fidelity voice-activated listening device online and planted it behind the decorative molding in his living room. It was not paranoia. It was reconnaissance. I put on my headphones and opened the software. The audio feed spiked. They were not at his house. The bug I had planted in his living room was silent. But I had a second one. A backup. One I had placed inside the hollow leg of the kitchen table at my own house just in case he ever decided to host a party while I was out. I switched feeds. The sound of slamming doors assaulted my ears. They were at my house. They must have broken in when they found the garage locked. I adjusted the volume. The audio was crisp. I heard the distinct click of high heels pacing aggressively on my hardwood floors. That was Monica. "He is not here, Brandon." Monica screamed. Her voice was shrill, vibrating with a mixture of rage and panic. "We checked the bedroom. We checked the basement. The garage is empty. The old SUV is gone." I heard heavy breathing. Brandon was hyperventilating. "Check the app again," he wheezed. "Check the tracker." "I checked it 5 times, Monica yelled back. "It is in Canada. It is moving north on Highway 99. He is crossing into Vancouver." "How is that possible? You said he was in the kitchen eating toast 20 minutes ago. He was—" Brandon sounded like he was on the verge of tears. "I talked to him. He sounded fine. He sounded confused. I thought the tracker was glitching." "He played you," Monica hissed. The venom in her voice was palpable. "The old man played you. He found it. He found the tracker, and he mailed it away. He is not senile, you idiot. He is laughing at us." There was a loud crash like a chair being kicked over. "If he is not here," Brandon said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper, "then we do not have the car. If we do not have the car by noon, Viper Holdings takes the house. If they can't take the house because he is gone, they kill us." Monica finished for him. Her voice went cold. "We need to find him, now. Not the car. The car is gone. We need him." How, Brandon asked. "He could be anywhere. He took the SUV. We used the system," Monica said. I could hear the gears turning in her head. She was the architect. Brandon was just the labor. We make him the problem. If he is driving around, he is a liability. We call the police. Tell them what? That he ran away because I forged his signature on a loan shark contract. "No, you moron," she snapped. "We tell them he is sick. We tell them he has lost his mind. We tell them he is a danger to himself and others. We get a silver alert issued. I sat in my hotel room, my hands clenched into fists. A silver alert. It is a broadcast system used to find missing senior citizens, usually those with Alzheimer's, dementia, or other mental disabilities. It blasts the person's description to every highway sign, every patrol car, and every smartphone in the state. If they did that, every cop in Washington would be looking for my wife's SUV. And if they found me, they wouldn't just bring me home. They would take me to a hospital. They would put me on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. And while I was locked up, sedated, and discredited, Brandon and Monica would have power of attorney. They would have control of the house. They would sign the deed over to the Russians to save their own skins. Do it, Brandon said. Call them. I heard the beep of a phone dialing. Then Brandon's voice changed instantly. The panic remained, but the tone shifted from terrified debtor to concerned, heartbroken son. It was a performance worthy of an award. Yes, 911. Please, I need help. It is my father, Wallace King. He paused, likely listening to the dispatcher. He is missing. He has been declining lately. His memory. He gets aggressive. He thinks people are chasing him. I went to check on him this morning and he is gone. His car is gone. I listened as my son dismantled my life brick by brick. Yes, he is driving a 2010 Ford Explorer. Silver. License plate number Alpha Kilo Niner 528. Please, you have to find him. He is confused. He called me this morning screaming about people in his garage. He is hallucinating. I think he might be trying to drive to Canada. He used to go fishing there 30 years ago. He doesn't have his medication. He is a danger to himself. He stopped. He listened. Thank you. Yes, a silver alert. Please hurry. If you find him, do not approach him aggressively. He might have a weapon. He is ex-military. He is paranoid. Just detain him and take him to County General. I have his medical records. I am his power of attorney. He hung up. The silence in my house was broken only by Monica's voice. Good, she said. Now we wait. As soon as they bag him, we get him committed. Once he is declared incompetent, we sign the house over to Viper. We tell them the car was stolen by the old man in a fit of dementia. It buys us time. They laughed. It was a short, nervous, ugly sound. I took the headphones off. The room was silent, but my head was roaring. They weren't just stealing my property. They were stripping me of my identity. They were going to paint me as a lunatic, a man with a broken mind to cover their own crimes. They were weaponizing the police force to hunt me down. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was still falling over Seattle. Somewhere out there, patrol cars were already receiving the data. Digital billboards were probably already flashing my license plate. Silver alert. Wallace King. Confused. Dangerous. I wasn't Wallace King, the father, anymore. I was a fugitive in my own city. But they had made a critical error. They assumed I would react like a confused old man. They assumed I would panic drive aimlessly or try to hide in plain sight. They forgot who I was before I was their father. I was a logistics engineer. I solved impossible problems. I moved things that did not want to be moved. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't look confused. I looked focused. If they wanted to play the medical game, I would play it too. But I wouldn't be the patient. I picked up my burner phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 10 years. Jack Slater. Jack was a private investigator now, but back in the day, he was the best MP I ever served with. He owed me a favor, a big one. The phone rang twice. Slater, a gruff voice, answered. Jack, it is Wallace, I said. Wallace, I haven't heard from you since the reunion. Everything okay? No, Jack. I need you to run a name for me. A company. Viper Holdings. And Jack, yeah, Do it off the books. I think I am about to be arrested for being senile, and I need to know who is trying to kill my son before I decide if I should let them. Jack Slater does not have an office with a frosted glass door or a pretty secretary. He works out of a converted shipping container in the industrial district of Tacoma, surrounded by scrapyards and the smell of diesel. He prefers it that way. It keeps the walk-ins to a minimum and the sightlines clear. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the burner phone pressed to my ear, listening to the hollow ringtone. I had not spoken to Jack in 10 years, not since we buried our platoon sergeant. But time does not erode the kind of debt Jack owes me. In 1991, during a night patrol that went sideways in the desert, I pulled him out of a burning transport vehicle while incoming fire chewed up the ground around us. I carried him 3 miles on a shattered ankle. He never said thank you. He just told me that if I ever needed a body buried or a truth dug up, he was my man. Today, I needed the truth. Slater, he answered on the 3rd ring. His voice sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. Jack, it is Wallace, I said. There was a pause, then the sound of a lighter flicking and a deep inhale. Wallace King. I figured you were dead or in a nursing home by now. What brings you out of the woodwork? I need intel, Jack. Fast and dirty. I need you to run a company for me. Viper Holdings, LLC. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard in the background. Jack was already working. Viper Holdings, he muttered. Sounds like a bad action movie villain. What is your interest? My son owes them $500,000, I said, keeping my voice flat. He put my house up as collateral. The typing stopped. $500,000, your boy Brandon, the one in finance, that is the one. Give me an hour, Jack said. If they are legit, I will have their tax returns. If they are not, I will have their body count. He hung up. I sat in the silence of the hotel room watching the rain streak the glass. I checked my laptop. The listening device in my house was quiet. Brandon and Monica must have left, probably to file the police report or meet with their lawyer. I was in the eye of the storm, that brief deceptive calm before the roof gets ripped off. I used the hour to secure my digital perimeter. I moved funds from my primary checking account to a secure offshore holding I set up years ago for emergencies. I changed passwords. I set up alerts. If Brandon tried to access anything, I would know. 58 minutes later, the burner phone rang. It is worse than you think, Jack said without preamble. His voice was tight, low, the kind of tone used when reporting casualties. Tell me, I said. Viper Holdings is not a bank, Wallace. It is not a hedge fund. It is a shell company registered in Cyprus, but the money trails lead straight back to Brighton Beach. It is Russian organized crime. The Bratva. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Russians. They were precise, brutal, and they did not care about American laws. There is more, Jack continued. I tapped into some chatter. I have a contact in the Financial Crimes Division who owes me. Viper has been under surveillance for 6 months. They are moving massive amounts of dirty cash from fentanyl distribution on the West Coast. They need clean accounts to wash it. They need mules with perfect credit scores and 0 criminal records. I closed my eyes. I saw the picture forming, and it was uglier than I could have imagined. Brandon didn't just borrow money, did he? I asked. No, Jack said. He made a deal. I found a digital paper trail linked to your son's IP address. He has been communicating with them via encrypted email. He pitched them a structure. He told them he had a perfect candidate for a layering operation. An elderly father. Retired military. Impeccable record. High-value assets but low liquidity. A ghost in the system. My hand gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. He sold me, I whispered. He promised them access, Wallace, Jack said. The $500,000 wasn't a loan. It was a down payment, an advance fee. Brandon promised them that he would take control of your accounts via power of attorney. He told them you were senile. He told them he could funnel $2 million a month through your real estate holdings and investment portfolio, wash it clean, and send it out to shell companies in the Caymans. He told them you wouldn't notice because you can barely remember your own name. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just greed. It was a complete dismantling of my honor. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I put through college, was planning to turn me into a felon. If this went through, I wouldn't just lose my house. I would spend the rest of my life in a federal supermax prison for money laundering, while he took a percentage off the top and lived the high life. And if I stop it, I asked. That is the problem, Jack said. The Russians do not do refunds on broken promises. They gave Brandon that $500,000 to grease the wheels. If he can't deliver your accounts, they will want their money back plus interest plus blood for the insult. And since he put your house and your car up as collateral, they are coming for you first. They think you are the obstacle. They are right, I said. Wallace, listen to me, Jack said, his voice urgent. You need to go deep. Disappear. I can get you a new identity. I can get you to Mexico by tonight. These guys do not play. They will torture you to get those routing numbers. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the city streets, wet and gray. I thought about running. I had the skills. I had the money. I could vanish into a fishing village in Baja and never look back. But then I thought about Brandon. Not the man he was now, but the boy he used to be. And I thought about the man I was. I spent 30 years serving my country. I lived by a code. You do not run from bullies. You do not let criminals take what is yours, and you do not let your son turn you into a criminal. I am not running, Jack, I said. You are going to get killed, he warned. Maybe, I said. But if I run, I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. And Brandon. They will peel him apart piece by piece when they realize he lied to them. I might hate what he did, but I won't let the Russians execute him. Not yet. So what is the play, Jack asked. I need you to stay on the line with your contact. I need to know where the Russians are operating from in Seattle. I need their pressure points. I am going to flush them out, I said. Brandon wants to play the game of the senile father fine. I will be the most dangerous senile man in history. I am going to use his lie against him. I am going to make him think he won right up until the moment the trap snaps shut. You are crazy, Wallace, Jack said, but I heard a hint of admiration in his voice. I am not crazy, Jack. I am motivated. I hung up the phone. The danger had shifted. It wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about freedom. If I failed, I went to prison, or I went to the morgue. If I succeeded, I would have to destroy my own son to save him. I looked at the listening device software on my laptop. The audio spike was back. They were in the car. I put the headphones on. He is gone, Brandon was saying to Monica. The police haven't found him. The silver alert is active, but no sightings. We can't wait for the police, Monica snapped. We need to force his hand. If he is hiding, we need to make him come out. We need to control the narrative before Viper realizes we don't have the accounts yet. What do we do? Brandon asked. We escalate, she said. We go public. We make him look dangerous. We make the whole city hunt him down for us. I took off the headphones. They were doubling down. Good. An enemy who attacks blindly is an enemy who makes mistakes. I opened my suitcase and took out a burner laptop I used for secure banking. I logged into my primary investment account. It was time to dangle a carrot. I was going to make a transaction. A small one. Just enough to light up the radar. Just enough to make them think they had me cornered. I initiated a transfer of $5,000. But I didn't send it to an offshore account. I sent it to a specific local business entity I knew they would recognize. I sat back and waited. The bait was in the water. Now I just needed the sharks to bite. While I was busy securing my digital perimeter in a hotel room that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner, my daughter-in-law was busy assassinating my character with a smartphone. I opened my laptop and logged into a burner social media account I used to monitor local news. I did not have to search far. Monica's post was already trending in our local community groups. There it was, a digital tombstone for my reputation. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. "Please help us," the caption read, followed by a string of broken heart emojis. My father-in-law, Wallace King, has gone missing. He is suffering from severe cognitive decline and aggressive dementia. He escaped our care this morning and is driving a silver Ford Explorer. He is confused, scared, and very likely aggressive if approached. We are terrified for his safety. Please, if you see him, do not engage him. Call 911 immediately. We just want him home safe. Below the text was a photograph. I remembered the moment she took it. It was 3 weeks ago. I was under the kitchen sink fixing a burst pipe that Brandon was too useless to handle. I had grease on my forehead, my hair was a mess, and I was shouting for a wrench because hot water was spraying onto my chest. In the photo, I looked like a maniac. My eyes were wide, my mouth was open in a snarl, and I looked disheveled and dirty. To anyone who did not know the context, I looked exactly like a man who had lost his mind. She had been planning this. She had snapped that picture and saved it, waiting for the moment she needed to paint me as a monster. I watched the comments roll in. People I had known for 20 years, neighbors I had loaned tools to, people I waved to at the grocery store. They were all buying it. "Oh no, poor Monica," one wrote. "I always thought he seemed a little off lately." "Praying for you guys," another said. "It is so hard when they get like this. My grandpa was the same way before we had to put him in a home." I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was my personal cell phone, the one I hadn't turned off yet. A text message from Mrs. Gable 3 doors down. "Wallace, honey, are you okay? Monica is so worried. Please just call the police or go home. You are not well." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Anything I said would just be used as evidence of my confusion. I was watching an expertly crafted cage descend around me. They were isolating me. They were cutting off my allies. If I walked into a coffee shop now, the barista wouldn't see a customer. She would see a fugitive lunatic and call the cops. But the social isolation was just the smokescreen. The real attack came 10 minutes later. I tried to log into my primary checking account to verify a transfer. The screen flickered, and then a red banner appeared across the top of the banking portal. "Account suspended. Contact branch immediately. Reference code S-99. Code S-99. I knew what that meant. Suspicious activity regarding account holder capacity. Brandon hadn't just filed a police report. He had taken that silver alert, walked into a branch, and slapped it on the manager's desk. He had used the police report as proof of my mental incapacity to trigger an emergency freeze. It is a protocol designed to protect seniors from scams, but right now it was being used to starve me out. They were cutting off my supply lines. Without access to my funds, I couldn't pay the hotel. I couldn't buy gas. I couldn't hire lawyers. They were trying to force me to come out of hiding because I would run out of cash. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought Wallace King was just a pensioner with a checking account and a savings account. They forgot who they were dealing with. They forgot that I have been a diamond tier client with that bank for 15 years, not because of my checking account, but because of the $4 million investment portfolio sitting in a blind trust that they didn't know existed. I did not call the customer service number on the back of the card. I did not call the local branch where Brandon was probably currently screaming at a teller. I pulled a business card out of my wallet. One made of thick cream-colored stock. I dialed the private number of David Ross, the regional director of private wealth management. He answered on the second ring. "This is David." "David, it is Wallace King," I said. My voice was not the voice of a confused old man. It was the voice of a man who could move his entire portfolio to a competitor in 10 minutes. Wallace David sounded surprised. "I just got a flag on your file. My compliance officer is telling me there is a police report saying you are wandering the streets in a fugue state. Your son is at the downtown branch right now trying to get emergency power of attorney based on a medical emergency. I need you to listen to me very carefully, David, I said. I am not senile. I am not missing. I am currently staying at the Warwick Hotel, and I am fully in control of my faculties. My son is attempting to execute a hostile takeover of my assets to cover a gambling debt involving organized crime. There was a silence on the line. In the world of high finance, you hear crazy things, but you also know money talks. Organized crime? David asked, his tone shifting from concern to professional alertness. Yes. He has forged my signature on a property deed. Now he is trying to use the bank's safety protocols to freeze me out so he can liquidate. If my accounts stay frozen, David, I will be forced to file a lawsuit against the bank for aiding and abetting financial fraud. And I will move the $4 million to Chase by close of business today. I heard the rapid tapping of keys. Okay, Wallace, I hear you. You sound lucid to me. But my hands are tied by the police report. If I unfreeze everything, compliance will have my head. I don't need you to unfreeze everything, I said. I need you to do something better. I need you to open a trap door. What do you mean I want you to override the freeze for exactly 1 hour? But I want you to set a limit. Allow outgoing transfers up to $5,000. Block anything higher. And I want you to flag the destination of any transfer attempted. You want to bait him? David asked. He is desperate, David. He needs money to pay off the interest on his loan shark debt, or they are going to hurt him. If he sees the account unlock even for a second, he won't ask questions. He will grab what he can. I need to see where he sends it. I need a paper trail that proves he isn't paying for my medical care. David paused. This is highly irregular, Wallace. So is my son trying to sell my house to the Russian mob, I countered. Do it, David, or I walk. Give me 2 minutes, David said. I hung up and watched the screen. 1 minute passed, then 2. The red banner disappeared. The account status changed to active, restricted. I leaned back in the hotel chair. The trap was set. Brandon was sitting at a bank or staring at his phone waiting for a miracle. He would see the account active. He wouldn't try to take it all at once. He was too smart for that. He would try to take a bite to keep the wolves at bay. I watched the transaction log in real time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then it happened. A pending transaction appeared. Amount $5,000. Recipient Serenity Care Solutions. I frowned. Serenity Care Solutions. That sounded like a nursing home. Was he actually trying to pay for my care? For a second, I doubted myself. Maybe he really believed I was sick. Then I typed the name into the search bar on my other screen. Serenity Care Solutions. It wasn't a nursing home chain. It was a private LLC registered 2 years ago. I clicked on the corporate filing. Registered Agent Monica Vance. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a care facility. It was a shell company owned by my daughter-in-law. They weren't paying for my care. They were funneling my money directly into their own pockets under the guise of medical expenses. And then I saw the address listed for the business. It wasn't an office. It was a secluded property 20 miles north of the city. A property that used to be a state-run psychiatric facility that closed down in the 90s. They weren't just stealing $5,000. They were funding a prison. They weren't going to put me in a nice home with bingo nights. They were going to put me in a hole owned by Monica where they could sedate me, bill my estate for the privilege, and keep me alive just long enough to sign whatever they needed. I looked at the screen. The transaction cleared. They took the bait. And now I knew exactly where the heart of the beast was. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting to stay out of a cage. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to go on the hunt. The digital banking interface on my burner laptop glowed with a sterile blue light, the only illumination in the darkened hotel room. I watched the cursor blink, hovering over the approval button. David Ross, my banker, was on the other end of the line, silent, waiting for my command. He had opened the gate just a crack, allowing a single transaction of $5,000 to pass through the security freeze we had initiated. It was a small amount compared to the millions in the portfolio. But to a desperate man with a gambling debt and a gun to his head, it was a lifeline. It was bait. I told David to execute the override. The screen refreshed. The pending transaction from Brandon's attempt 30 minutes ago turned from yellow to green. Approved. $5,000 vanished from my primary checking account. I did not care about the money. I cared about the destination. In the world of logistics, you do not track the package to see if it arrives. You track it to see who signs for it. The recipient field populated instantly. Serenity Care Solutions. I sat back in the chair, the leather creaking softly. Serenity. It sounded peaceful. It sounded like a place with manicured lawns and nurses who brought you warm tea. But my gut, honed by 3 decades of sniffing out lies in supply chains, told me otherwise. Brandon wasn't paying a legitimate facility. He was paying off a conspirator. I picked up my phone and dialed Jack Slater. Jack, I said as soon as he answered. I have a name. Serenity Care Solutions. I need to know who owns the paper, and I need to know what they actually do. I am on it. Jack grunted. He didn't ask why. He just started typing. I could hear the rhythmic clatter of his mechanical keyboard over the line. While he worked, I stared at the transaction details. The routing number led to a local credit union, not a major commercial bank. That meant it was small private and likely under the radar. Got it. Jack said, his voice dropping an octave. This is interesting. Serenity Care Solutions is not a nursing home, Wallace. It is listed as a specialized residential facility for high-risk geriatric patients. High risk, I asked. Yeah. That is code for involuntary commitment. It is a lockdown facility. But here is the kicker. The LLC is registered to a holding company called MKV Enterprises. MKV, I repeated. Monica Catherine Vance, Jack said. That is your daughter-in-law's maiden name, isn't it? The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Monica. My son's wife. The woman who brought potato salad to the 4th of July barbecue and complained about the heat. She didn't just find a nursing home. She built one. Or at least her family did. Dig deeper, Jack. I commanded, my voice devoid of emotion. I am looking at the board of directors, Jack continued. It is a family affair. Her father is the primary investor. Her brother is the administrator. And Wallace, look at the permits. They have a waiver for restraint usage and an in-house pharmacy license. They are not in the business of care. They are in the business of containment. I closed my eyes, visualizing the map. The facility was 20 miles north, deep in the woods, isolated. It wasn't a place you went to get better. It was a place you went to disappear. They weren't planning to put me in a home where I could play chess and watch the birds. They were planning to traffic me into a private prison owned by my daughter-in-law's family. Jack kept reading from the file he had hacked open. I am seeing payroll records here. They have a notary public on staff, Wallace, a notary who works the night shift. Why would a nursing home need a notary at 3 in the morning? To witness signatures signed under duress, I said. Exactly. They drug the patients, wake them up in the middle of the night when they are disoriented, and have them sign over power of attorney property deeds, whatever they want. And because it is a medical facility, if the patient complains later, they just point to the chart and say it is the dementia talking. The puzzle was complete. The tracker on the car was just the beginning. The Russian mob debt was the catalyst. But this plan, this Serenity Care Solutions, this had been in the works for a long time. They were going to grab me, sedate me, and throw me into a hole that Monica controlled. They would keep me doped up on antipsychotics while they systematically liquidated every asset I owned. They would sell the house, empty the accounts, and wash the dirty money for the Russians through my clean name. And when there was nothing left, when I was a husk of a man with zero net worth, they would likely let nature or an accidental overdose take its course. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was the death of something soft. The last remnant of the father who taught Brandon how to throw a baseball, the man who welcomed Monica into the family, the grandfather who bought ice cream for his grandkids. It all evaporated. The disappointment was gone. There was no room for it anymore. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. This was tactical. They were enemy combatants, and they had made the fatal mistake of letting the target see the kill zone. "Jack," I said. "Do they have vacancies?" What Jack asked, confused. Serenity. "Do they have empty beds?" "Yeah. Looks like they are at half capacity." "Why?" "Because I am going to make a reservation," I said. "But not for me." I hung up the phone. I looked at the laptop screen at the $5,000 transfer that proved their intent. They thought they had won a small victory. They thought the money was flowing. They thought the old man was confused and the system was working. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I adjusted my collar. I didn't see a victim. I saw a man who had cleared minefields in the desert. I saw a man who knew how to dismantle a bomb without shaking. I wasn't just going to defend myself. Defense is a losing game. I was going to go on the offensive. I was going to prune the family tree. I would take them apart piece by piece, asset by asset, lie by lie. I would start with Brandon, then Monica, and finally the Russians. I picked up my burner phone. It was time to make a call. It was time to play the role of the scared, confused old man one last time. I was going to lure them out of their holes. I was going to set a table they couldn't refuse to sit at. And then I was going to serve them exactly what they deserved. I dialed Brandon's number. My hand was steady. My voice was ready to tremble on command. Let the game begin. I sat in the back booth of a diner called The Rusty Spoon, located off a forgotten exit of Highway 2. It was not the Canadian border, but with the fog rolling in off the mountains and the neon sign flickering with a dying buzz, it felt like the edge of the world. It was the perfect stage for a tragedy. I checked the time. It was 6 in the evening. The shadows were long, and the air smelled of stale grease and despair. I placed my burner phone on the Formica table. I took a deep breath, holding it in my lungs until they burned, forcing my heart rate to spike, forcing my body into a state of physiological stress. I needed to sound weak. I needed to sound broken. I dialed Brandon. He picked up on the first ring. He didn't even say hello. "Dad, is that you? The signal is active again. Where did you go?" I let a whimper escape my throat. It was a pathetic sound, one I would have been ashamed of in my former life, but right now, it was a weapon. "Brandon," I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't know. I see trees. Big trees. There was a sign. Something about a border crossing. I think I drove too far. I am scared, son. The car ran out of gas. I am at a diner. I don't remember how I got here. I could practically hear the adrenaline hit his bloodstream. He covered the mouthpiece, probably shouting to Monica, but then he came back, his voice dripping with forced saccharine concern. "Okay, Dad. It is okay. You are having an episode. Stay right there. Do not move. Send me your location pin. We are coming to get you. We will bring you home." I sent the pin. It wasn't the border. It was 40 minutes from his house if he broke the speed limit. I hung up and ordered a slice of cherry pie I had no intention of eating. I stared at the congealed red filling and waited. I wasn't just waiting for my son. I was waiting for the hammer to drop. I had texted Jack Slater 10 minutes ago with 3 words, green light. Showtime. 42 minutes later, the black Range Rover screeched into the gravel lot outside. I watched through the blinds. Brandon jumped out first, leaving the door open. Monica followed, clutching an oversized purse that I knew contained the paperwork that would end my life as a free man. They didn't look worried. They looked like predators who had just cornered a wounded animal. They burst through the door, scanning the room. When they saw me huddled in the corner booth with my hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee, they put on their masks. Brandon rushed over, his face contorted into a grimace of pity. "Dad, oh my God, look at you." He hugged me. It felt like being squeezed by a python. He smelled of sweat and fear. "I am sorry," I mumbled, staring at the table. "I just wanted to go for a drive. I got lost. The road. It just kept going." "It is okay, Wallace," Monica cooed, sliding into the booth opposite me. She reached out and patted my hand with her cold, manicured fingers. "You are safe now. We are here. But we can't take you back to the house tonight. It is not safe. You need medical attention. You are confused." I looked up at her, widening my eyes. "Medical attention, no hospitals. I hate hospitals." No, not a hospital," Brandon said quickly, sliding in next to her. "So, a private place. Very exclusive. Serenity Care. They have specialists, Dad. They can help you with your memory problems. They can make sure you don't get lost again." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek leather folder. He placed it on the table, pushing aside the untouched pie. "We just need to get you checked in," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "It is just standard procedure. The doctors need permission to treat you. Just sign here and we can get you a warm bed." He opened the folder. There was a single sheet of paper on top, covered in dense legal text. At the bottom, a yellow sticky note with an arrow pointed to the signature line. It wasn't an admission form. I could read upside down. I could read in the dark. I saw the words "durable power of attorney" and "revocation of prior wills" buried in the second paragraph. This was the master key. If I signed this, I became a ghost in my own life. They could sell my house, drain my accounts, and leave me to rot in Monica's converted asylum without ever asking a judge for permission. I picked up the pen Brandon offered. It was a Mont Blanc. Expensive. Flashy. Bought with money he probably stole from me. I held the pen over the paper, letting my hand tremble violently. I made the tip of the pen dance over the line, leaving little dots of ink. I can't read it without my glasses," I stammered. "Is this just for the doctor?" "Yes, Dad," Monica said. Her eyes fixed on the pen tip like a hawk. "Just for the doctor. Just sign it so we can go. Please, Wallace. Do it for us." I lowered the pen. I touched the paper. I saw the triumphant gleam ignite in Brandon's eyes. He thought he had won. He thought the nightmare with the Russians was over, because he was about to own a $4 million asset he could liquidate by Friday. The bell above the diner door jingled. Heavy footsteps echoed on the linoleum floor. Not the hurried steps of a worried son, but the slow, deliberate stride of a man who owns the room. I stopped writing. I looked up past Brandon's shoulder. Brandon didn't turn around. He was too focused on the signature. Dad signed the paper, he hissed, his patience fraying. The footsteps stopped right at our table. A large shadow fell over us, blocking out the dim light of the diner. "Brandon King," a deep voice rumbled. Brandon froze. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like he had been slapped with flour. He slowly turned his head. Standing there was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He wore a long black leather trench coat that cost more than my first car. His head was shaved, and a jagged scar ran from his jawline to his ear. He wasn't Russian, but he looked the part perfectly. It was Jack Slater, my private investigator, channeling every ounce of menace he had learned in the military police and the dark alleys of Tacoma. Who are you?" Brandon squeaked. Jack didn't look at me. He didn't look at Monica. He stared directly into Brandon's soul. He leaned down, placing a hand on the table. I saw the knuckles were tattooed. Fake tattoos applied an hour ago, but Brandon didn't know that. "You are hard to find, Brandon." Jack said, his voice a low growl that vibrated the silverware. "My employers are getting impatient. You said you had the asset. You said the old man was handled." Brandon began to shake. Not a fake tremble like mine. A real bone-deep shudder of terror. He looked at me, then at Jack, then back at me. I am handling it," he stammered. "This is him. This is my father. He is signing the papers right now." "Look," he pointed at me. He pointed at his own father, offering me up to a hitman like a sacrificial lamb. Jack looked at me with cold indifference. He looked at the paper. Then he snatched the paper from under my pen. He crumpled it in his massive fist. "Too late," Jack said. The deadline was noon. "You missed the deadline, Brandon. Viper Holdings does not do extensions. We do not want the paper anymore. We want the cash. Or we want the collateral." Monica let out a small, terrified sound. "Please," she whispered. "We just need one more day. Once he signs." Jack slammed his fist onto the table. The coffee mugs jumped. "No more days," Jack roared. "You played games with us. You moved the car to Canada. You think we are stupid. You think we don't track our investments." He grabbed Brandon by the lapel of his expensive jacket and hauled him half out of the booth. Brandon scrambled his legs, kicking uselessly. "The deal is changed," Jack hissed into his face. $2 million. In cash. By midnight. Or we take the house, the car, and we take pieces of you as interest." Jack shoved him back into the seat. He looked at me for the first time. He gave me a wink so subtle only I could see it, then turned and walked out of the diner, the bell jingling cheerfully behind him. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Brandon. He was hyperventilating, clutching his chest. Monica was staring at the door, her face a mask of pure horror. They weren't looking at a confused old man anymore. They were looking at their own mortality. I need to go to the hospital," Brandon wheezed. "I think I am having a heart attack." Monica looked at him with disgust. "Get up," she snapped. "We have to get the money." She grabbed the pen and shoved it back into my hand. "Sign it." She screamed at me, her facade of kindness completely gone. "Sign the damn paper, old man, or we are all dead." I looked at her. I looked at the pen. And then I let my hand go limp. The pen clattered onto the table. I don't feel well," I whispered, clutching my chest, mimicking Brandon's panic, but with better acting. I think I need a doctor." I slumped sideways in the booth, closing my eyes. "Damn it," Monica shrieked. She couldn't force me to sign. Not here. Not with the waitress staring at us from behind the counter, phone in hand, already dialing 911 because a gangster just threatened a customer. Brandon scrambled for his phone. He wasn't calling a doctor for me. He was calling an ambulance because it was the only way to get me out of there without the Russians seeing us leave. They were trapped. They had to save me to save themselves. And in doing so, they were driving me straight to the next phase of my plan. The hospital, where I would have an audience, and where the Canadian decoy was about to pay off. The bell above the diner door was still jingling from Jack's exit, but the sound was drowned out by the blood rushing in my ears. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating like smoke after a gunshot. $2 million. Midnight. Or we all die. I sat there slumped against the cold vinyl of the booth, watching my son unravel. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The polished, successful finance broker mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Beneath it was a feral animal cornered and foaming at the mouth. He wasn't looking at the door where the gangster had just vanished. He was looking at me. And in his eyes I didn't see a father. I saw a life raft that was refusing to inflate. You heard him, Brandon screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek that caused the couple at the counter to turn around. You heard what he said. He is going to kill us. He is going to skin us alive. He slammed his hands onto the table, making the silverware jump. His face was inches from mine, spittle flying from his lips. The desperation coming off him was palpable, a sour stench of sweat and adrenaline. Dad, you have to sign now, right now. He didn't wait for me to pick up the pen. He grabbed it. He jammed it into my hand, his fingers clamping over mine with bruising force. He dragged my hand toward the crumpled document that Jack had tossed back onto the table. Sign it. Old man, he roared, shaking my hand so hard the pen tore through the napkin under my coffee cup. Sign it or they kill the whole family. Do you understand? They will kill Monica. They will kill me. Just sign the damn paper. I looked at him, letting my eyes go wide with feigned confusion and terror. I made my hand limp, resisting his force not with strength, but with dead weight. Brandon. You are hurting me, I whimpered, keeping my voice loud enough for the waitress to hear. I don't understand. Who was that man? Why do you owe him money? Shut up, Monica hissed from across the table. She reached across and grabbed my other wrist, digging her nails into my skin. We don't have time for your senile questions. Wallace, just do what he says. She was no longer the sweet daughter-in-law who brought casseroles. She was a banshee. Her eyes were wild, her makeup smeared. She pulled my arm, trying to position the paper under the pen. It was a physical assault. In the middle of a diner, my son and his wife were physically forcing an elderly man to sign a legal document. It was sloppy. It was reckless. It was exactly what I needed. I looked past them. The waitress was staring, phone in hand. The truck driver at the counter had swiveled on his stool, his eyes narrowed. I had my audience. Now I needed my curtain call. I yanked my hand back, dropping the pen. It clattered onto the floor. No, I shouted, putting as much tremble into my voice as I could muster. I won't sign. You are scaring me. I want to go home. Brandon's face turned purple. He lunged across the table, grabbing my collar with both hands. You are not going home. You are signing this paper. If I have to break your fingers to make you hold the pen, that was the line. He had crossed it. He had threatened physical violence in a public place. It was time to pull the ripcord. I gasped. A loud, wet, ragged sound. I clutched my left arm with my right hand. I squeezed my eyes shut and let my body go rigid, then violently limp. My chest, I screamed, letting the air rush out of my lungs. Oh God, my chest, I can't breathe. I slid sideways, knocking the coffee mug off the table. It shattered on the floor, a punctuation mark to my performance. I slumped down into the booth seat, my head lolling back, my mouth open. Dad. Brandon froze, his hands still hovering where my collar had been. I let out a low groan and twitched. Panic, real panic, flooded the booth. Not the panic of debt, but the panic of a homicide charge. If I died right here, right now, while he was shaking me, it wasn't just a loan shark problem. It was manslaughter. Oh my God, Monica shrieked. Wallace. She scrambled out of the booth, but she didn't check my pulse. She looked around the diner, eyes wide with terror. He is having a heart attack, she yelled, playing to the room, trying to salvage the narrative. My father-in-law is having a heart attack. Help us, the waitress was already moving. She vaulted the counterphone pressed to her ear. I need an ambulance at the Rusty Spoon on Highway 2, elderly male, possible cardiac arrest. He is conscious, but unresponsive. The truck driver was there a second later, pushing Brandon aside. Give him air, son. Back off! Brandon stumbled back, his face pale. He looked at the crumpled power of attorney form on the table. He looked at me, gasping for air on the vinyl seat. He looked at the trucker, who was now loosening my tie. He couldn't force me to sign. Not with a witness checking my pulse. Not with the waitress reading the address to dispatch. The window of opportunity had slammed shut, crushing his fingers in the process. He snatched the document off the table and shoved it into his jacket pocket. He had to pivot. He had to be the grieving son again. He dropped to his knees beside the booth, grabbing my hand. "Dad, hang on. Dad, please don't die." I peeked through a slit in my eyelids. He was crying. Real tears. But he wasn't crying for me. He was crying because he knew that without that signature, he was walking into a firing squad. But I let out another moan, clutching my chest harder. I needed to make sure they took me. I needed to get into the system. "Is the ambulance coming?" the trucker shouted at the waitress. 5 minutes, she yelled back. Monica was pacing by the door, chewing her fingernails. She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously, probably texting her brother at the Serenity facility. Plan failed. He is dying. Pivot to medical emergency. I knew what they were thinking. If I went to the hospital, they could still win. They could tell the doctors I was incompetent. They could use the medical emergency to get an emergency guardianship. They thought the hospital was neutral ground. They were wrong. The hospital was my battlefield. I kept up the act, my breathing shallow and raspy. The trucker kept talking to me, telling me to stay with him. I squeezed his hand, a silent thank you. He was a good man. He was protecting me even if he didn't know the whole story. When the sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder and louder, I saw a flicker of hope die in Brandon's eyes. He knew he couldn't stop this train. He had to ride it. He leaned in close to me, his voice a whisper that the trucker couldn't hear. "Don't you dare die on me, old man," he hissed. "You owe me that signature. You owe me my life." I didn't respond. I just let my head roll to the side as the paramedics burst through the door with their stretcher and gear. They swarmed the booth, oxygen mask, blood pressure cuff, questions thrown at Brandon. "Does he have a history of heart trouble?" No. No, Brandon lied. "He is healthy, he is just confused. He has dementia. Is he on medication?" "I don't know." I let them load me onto the stretcher. I let them strap me in. As they wheeled me out into the cold night air, the rain hitting my face, I saw Brandon and Monica following behind, looking like two people marching to the gallows. They were getting into the ambulance with me. Good. That meant they were leaving their car behind. And more importantly, it meant they were walking into a building full of doctors, nurses, and police officers. A building where I could finally drop the act and drop the hammer. I closed my eyes as the doors slammed shut. The siren began to wail. To Brandon, it sounded like an emergency. To me, it sounded like victory. The Canadian decoy had bought me time. The diner confrontation had bought me witnesses. Now the hospital would give me the verdict. The ambulance ride was a masterclass in gaslighting. By the time they wheeled me through the automatic doors of Harborview Medical Center, my son had already pivoted. The heart attack narrative was dead. The EKG in the ambulance had been flat and steady, proving my heart was as strong as a draft horse. Brandon knew that if the doctors cleared me medically, I would walk out the door and straight to a police station. He couldn't let that happen. He needed me contained. He needed me discredited. So as the gurney rattled down the hallway, Brandon leaned in close to the triage nurse, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial, heartbroken whisper. "He is not having a heart attack," Brandon said, shaking his head. "He does this. He fakes medical emergencies when he gets confused or aggressive. He thinks people are chasing him. He thinks he is a spy." I lay on the stretcher, staring up at the fluorescent lights whizzing by, listening to my own son dismantle my sanity. He was painting a picture of a man who was a danger to himself. He was building the cage. They wheeled me into a curtained bay in the emergency room. A doctor appeared a minute later. Dr. Evans, according to his badge. He looked young, overworked, and tired. He was the perfect mark for a manipulator like Brandon. "Mr. King," Dr. Evans said, shining a penlight into my eyes. "Can you tell me your name and date of birth?" I opened my mouth to speak. I was going to tell him my name, my rank, and exactly which statute of the penal code my son was violating. "Wallace King." Brandon interrupted, stepping between me and the doctor. "He was born in 54. "Doctor, please, you have to understand. He has been off his meds for 2 days. He was violent at the diner. He tried to attack my wife. That was the kill shot. The accusation of violence." I sat up, pushing the oxygen mask aside. "That is a lie," I said, my voice firm. "I did not attack anyone. These two are trying to coerce me into signing a power of attorney." Brandon looked at the doctor with sad, wet eyes. "See, he is paranoid. He thinks everyone is after his money. He thinks there is a conspiracy." "Look at his wrists, doctor." Brandon grabbed my arm and pulled up my sleeve. There were bruises there, fresh and purple, shaped like fingerprints. They were from when Monica had dug her nails into me at the diner, trying to force my hand. "He did this to himself," Brandon whispered. "He was clawing at his own skin in the car. He said he wanted to tear the bugs out." I stared at him. It was a lie so bold, so horrific that for a second I was impressed. He was turning Monica's assault into evidence of my self-harm. Dr. Evans looked at the bruises. He looked at my agitation. He looked at the well-dressed, crying son. Then he looked at me, the disheveled old man who had supposedly just faked a heart attack. "We need to calm him down," Dr. Evans said to the nurse. "He is escalating. Let's get him something to take the edge off. 2 milligrams of Ativan. Oral. If he refuses, we go intramuscular." I knew the protocol. If I fought, if I shouted, they would strap me down and inject me. Then I would be unconscious, and when I woke up, I would be in a locked psych ward with a 72-hour hold on my chart. I couldn't afford to be knocked out. I needed to be awake to pull the trigger on the trap I had set. I sat back against the pillows. I let my shoulders slump. I made my face go slack, resigning myself to the role. I am just tired," I whispered. "I just want to sleep." The nurse approached with a small paper cup. Inside was a small white pill. "Take this, honey," she said. "It will help you rest." I took the cup. My hand trembled just enough to sell it. I tossed the pill into my mouth and took a sip of water. I swallowed hard, bobbing my Adam's apple. "Good," the nurse said. She patted my shoulder. "We are going to move you to a quiet room for observation until the psych consult can get down here." They wheeled me out of the bay and down a corridor to a room with no windows and a heavy door. They helped me into a hospital gown. They put the rails up on the bed. "Rest now, Dad," Brandon said from the doorway. "We will be right outside. We aren't going anywhere." He closed the door. I waited. I counted to 10. I counted to 20. I listened to the footsteps fading away down the hall. I sat up. I leaned over and spat the pill into the tissue I had palmed from the bedside table. I had tucked it under my tongue, an old trick from a survival course I took in the 80s. I wasn't sedated. I was running on pure adrenaline. I looked at the door. There was a small window, but no one was looking in. I was alone. I reached down to my left ankle. I was wearing compression socks, the kind old men wear for circulation. But inside the band of the left sock, pressed against my calf, was a burner phone. It was thin, cheap, and untraceable. I had bought it with cash 3 days ago. I pulled it out. My thumb hovered over the screen. Brandon thought he had won. He thought he had me isolated in a public hospital labeled as a lunatic, waiting for a transfer to Monica's private facility, where I would disappear forever. He thought the narrative was set Wallace King, the confused old man who wandered off and hurt himself. But he forgot one thing. He forgot the lie he told the police this morning. He told them I was driving my Mustang to Canada. He told them the tracker showed the car crossing the border. I typed a text message to Jack Slater. It was short. 2 words. Activate Canada. I hit send. The Canada package was not a box of parts. It was a contingency plan. When I mailed that tracker to my buddy Jim in Vancouver, I didn't just ask him to toss it. I asked him to put it on his truck. But that wasn't enough. A tracker is just a dot on a screen. It can be disputed. It can be called a glitch. I needed visual confirmation. I needed undeniable proof that Wallace King's car was in 2 places at once. My friend Jim manages a fleet of transport vehicles. I had asked him to do one thing. I asked him to take the license plates I had mailed along with the tracker spare plates I kept in the garage and slap them on a silver SUV he had in his lot, a Ford Explorer just like mine. And then I asked him to drive that car through the automated license plate recognition cameras at the Peace Arch border crossing. Not into the US, into Canada. I checked my watch. It was 9 p.m. In Vancouver, Jim would be hitting the checkpoint right about now. The cameras would snap the plate. The system would flag it because of the silver alert Brandon had issued. The alert said Wallace King was driving a silver Ford Explorer with my plates. So in about 5 minutes, the Washington State Police were going to get a hit. A confirmed photographic hit of my vehicle entering Canada driven by a man who looked vaguely like me from a distance. But here I was, lying in a hospital bed in downtown Seattle, checked in by my son, verified by a doctor, and supposedly sedated. I couldn't be in Canada driving a car and in a Seattle hospital bed having a mental breakdown at the same time. The narrative was about to fracture. The police would see the hit. They would call the station. They would see the report filed by Brandon claiming I was here. They would see the inconsistency. And that inconsistency would bring the police to this room. Not to arrest me, but to ask Brandon why he filed a missing person report for a man who was allegedly driving in another country while simultaneously checking that same man into a psych ward. It was the perfect alibi. It was the impossible object. I put the phone back in my sock. I lay back on the pillow. I closed my eyes and waited for the chaos. I wasn't trapped in here with them. They were trapped in here with the truth. And the truth was currently doing 60 miles an hour on Highway 99, 3 hours north of here. The sterile hum of the hospital room was broken only by the rhythmic beep of the monitor next to my bed. I lay perfectly still, my breathing regulated, my eyes closed, just enough to leave a sliver of vision. Beyond the heavy door, I could hear the muffled voices of my son and his wife. They were probably discussing real estate agents, or how quickly they could liquidate my portfolio once the 72-hour psychiatric hold was formalized. They sounded relaxed, confident. They thought the game was over. But then the rhythm of the hallway changed. It wasn't the squeak of nurses' shoes or the shuffle of patients anymore. It was the heavy, authoritative thud of boots. Police boots. Not one pair, but several. I tensed my muscles under the thin hospital sheet. The timing was impeccable. The door to my room pushed open, but the people entering didn't come to my bedside. They stopped in the doorway, blocking the exit. I heard Brandon gasp. "Officers," Brandon said, his voice pitching up in surprise. "Is everything okay? Did you find—" "Wait, my dad is right here. We found him." I was just about to call the precinct to update the report. He was lying, of course. He had no intention of calling the police to say I was found. He needed the silver alert to remain active so the doctors would believe his story about my dementia. "Mr. Brandon King," a deep, commanding voice asked. It wasn't the tired voice of a beat cop. It was a sergeant. "Yes, that is me," Brandon replied. "We need you to step out into the hallway, sir. We have a conflicting report regarding the silver alert you filed this morning for your father, Wallace King." Brandon laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "Conflicting? What is there to conflict? He is right there in the bed. He had an episode. He is sedated. That is the problem, sir, the sergeant said. His tone was not friendly. It was the tone of an investigator who smells a rat. At 2100 hours exactly 40 minutes ago, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police contacted us. They have a confirmed hit on a silver Ford Explorer license plate, Alpha Kilo 90528. I saw Brandon's shadow freeze on the wall. What Brandon whispered. Your father's vehicle just crossed the border into British Columbia at the Peace Arch. Crossing, the sergeant continued. We have a photograph of the driver. Brandon stammered. That is impossible. The car is supposed to be where Mr. King, the sergeant, pressed. You told dispatch this morning that your father drove away in that vehicle in a confused state. You filed a sworn police report stating he was missing and driving that specific car. Yes, Brandon yelled, panic seeping into his voice. He did. But then we found him at a diner on Highway 2. He must have... I don't know. Maybe someone stole the car from the diner, so let me get this straight, the sergeant said, stepping closer. You found your father, who you claim has severe dementia, at a diner 40 miles away from the border. But his vehicle, the one you reported he was driving, is currently entering Canada. And you didn't think to report the vehicle stolen, or update us that you had found the missing person. We were worried about his health, Brandon shouted. He had a heart attack. Or we thought he did. Look, he is right there. Ask the doctor. The sergeant looked into the room. He looked at me, the frail old man lying under the sheets. Then he looked back at Brandon. If he is right here, then who is driving the car? Mr. King, and why does the timestamp on the border crossing match the exact time you were checking him into this hospital? It was the logic trap, the impossible object. Brandon couldn't explain it, because his entire narrative was built on the lie that I was confused and lost. If I was here but the car was there, then his story about the morning disappearance fell apart. It was time. I sat up. I didn't groan. I didn't rub my eyes. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat up straight, my spine rigid, my eyes clear and sharp. Officer? I said, my voice projecting clearly into the hallway. I can explain who is driving the car. And I can explain why my son is lying to you. Brandon spun around, his face draining of color. Dad, you are supposed to be asleep. I am not asleep, Brandon, I said coldly, and I am not senile. I looked at the sergeant. Sergeant, my name is Wallace King. I am a retired logistics engineer for the United States Army. I am currently being held in this room against my will under false pretenses fabricated by my son and his wife. Monica stepped forward, trying to salvage the wreck. Officer, don't listen to him. He is having an episode. He is paranoid. He thinks he is in the army. I ignored her. I reached down to my left ankle and pulled the burner phone from my sock. I held it up. I did not drive to Canada, Sergeant, I said. I mailed a GPS tracker to Canada yesterday because I found it hidden under my wheel well. My son put it there. And the reason he put it there is because he owes $500,000 to a criminal organization, and he used my property as collateral. You are crazy, Brandon shrieked. He lunged toward the room, but a uniformed officer blocked him, putting a hand on his chest. Sergeant, I continued swiping the screen on the phone. This evening, at a diner called the Rusty Spoon, my son and his wife attempted to force me to sign a power of attorney document. When I refused, they physically assaulted me. I feigned a medical emergency to get to a safe location with witnesses, namely, here. I pressed play on the audio file. The sound was tinny but undeniable. The diner's ambient noise faded, and then Brandon's voice, thick with terror and rage, filled the hospital corridor. Sign it, old man. Sign it, or they kill the whole family. Do you understand? They will kill Monica. They will kill me. Just sign the damn paper. Then Monica's voice, sharp and cruel. We don't have time for your senile questions, Wallace. Just do what he says. And finally, the deep, menacing voice of Jack Slater playing the part of the enforcer. $2 million. In cash. by midnight. Or we take the house. I stopped the recording. The silence in the hallway was absolute. The doctor who had arrived to check on the commotion looked from me to Brandon with horror. The sergeant's hand moved instinctively to his belt. "That doesn't sound like a medical emergency," Mr. King, the sergeant said, turning his gaze on Brandon. "That sounds like extortion and elder abuse." Brandon was shaking. He looked at the phone in my hand, then at the exit signs. He realized the walls were closing in. "It is not what it sounds like," Brandon pleaded. "He is twisting it. He set me up. He sent the car to Canada. He planned this. You filed a false police report." The sergeant said, his voice dropping an octave. "You wasted state resources on a silver alert to cover up a debt collection, and you tried to have a lucid man committed to a psychiatric ward." "It was for his own good," Monica yelled, losing control. "He has millions of dollars sitting there doing nothing. We were just trying to protect the assets," I said, standing up from the bed. "And there is the confession." The sergeant nodded to his officers. "Place them in cuffs. I want them separated. We are going down to the station to sort this out." Officers moved in. Brandon began to cry, a pathetic weeping sound. Monica screamed that her father knew the mayor. I watched them being led away, the handcuffs gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was the witness, the victim, and the prosecutor all rolled into one. But I wasn't done. As the sergeant turned to me, I held up a finger. "One more thing, Sergeant," I said. "Before you book them, you need to know about the people they owe money to, because the man on that recording wasn't the real threat. The real threat is a group called Viper Holdings, and if my son doesn't pay them by midnight, they are going to come looking for him. And since he is in your custody, I suggest you ask him where he told them the money was coming from." The sergeant's eyes widened. I walked over to the chair where my clothes were folded. I picked up my jacket and pulled out the loan documents I had taken from the trunk. "Here is the contract," I said, handing it to the officer. "Forged signature and all. My son didn't just lie to you. He sold my life to the Russian mob. And now I am handing the receipt to you." The rain outside the police precinct was cold enough to crack pavement. I stood under the concrete overhang watching the water cascade off the roof, like a curtain closing on the second act of a bad play. It was 3 a.m. I had given my statement. I had handed over the documents. I had played the part of the vindicated victim perfectly. But as I watched the steam rise from my coffee cup, I knew the night wasn't over. You do not light a fire in a powder keg and expect the explosion to stop just because the police showed up. Jack Slater pulled up to the curb in his unmarked sedan. He rolled down the window, the interior light casting deep shadows on his scarred face. "Get in, Wallace," he growled. "We are not done." I climbed into the passenger seat. The car smelled of stale tobacco and gun oil. "What is the situation?" I asked. Brandon made bail. Jack said, putting the car in gear. "Filing a false police report is a misdemeanor. He walked out 10 minutes ago." But Monica didn't walk out with him. I frowned. "They arrested her too, no?" Jack said, merging into the sparse traffic. "She wasn't charged yet. She was waiting for him in the hospital parking lot while he was being processed downtown. But she never made it to the station to pick him up. Her phone is dead, and Brandon just got a message that made him vomit on the precinct steps." My burner phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't a text. It was a video file, sent from an unknown number. I opened it. The screen was small, but the image was high definition. It was shot in a dark room with a single overhead light swinging rhythmically, casting nauseating shadows against a concrete wall. In the center of the frame was a chair, and tied to the chair with duct tape over her mouth and zip ties cutting into her wrists was Monica. She looked terrified. Her mascara was running in black streaks down her face. Her perfect hair was matted with sweat. She wasn't the arrogant woman who planned to lock me away. She was a hostage. A man stepped into the frame. He wore a balaclava and held up a newspaper from today to prove the date. He didn't speak. He just pointed a suppressed pistol at Monica's knee. She screamed behind the tape, a muffled guttural sound of pure animal panic. Then the video cut to black. A text message followed. 2 million, 1 hour, or we start sending pieces. I stared at the phone. Viper Holdings had stopped playing banker. They had realized Brandon was a liability. He had drawn the police to their operation with his clumsy silver alert stunt. He had exposed their financial leverage. They were cutting their losses and cashing out the only way they knew how. My phone rang. It was Brandon. I answered. "Dad, help me." "Oh God. Dad." "They have her," he was weeping. Not the manipulative tears he used in the diner. These were the heaving, ugly sobs of a man whose world has just been fed into a wood chipper. "I saw the video, Brandon," I said, my voice flat. "They grabbed her at the hospital," he screamed. "They were watching us the whole time. They know everything. They know you have the money. Dad, they want $2 million. They said if I don't pay, they are going to kill her." I looked out the window at the passing city lights. $2 million. That was exactly half of my liquid assets. I could pay it. I could make a call wire the funds to an offshore account and likely save Monica's life. It would be clean. It would be easy. But then I remembered the conversation I had heard through the wall. I remembered Monica laughing as she talked about switching my medication. I remembered her suggesting they hide my things to make me think I was losing my mind. I remembered her saying she used him to fill her emptiness. She had planned to erase my identity. She had planned to lock me in a room until I died. And now she was in a room waiting for me to save her. "Dad, are you there?" Brandon shrieked. "Please, I know you have the money. The lawyer said you have millions. Just pay them. I will do anything. I will sign the house back. I will disappear. Just save her." I took a deep breath. I thought about the man I used to be. The father who fixed bicycles. The man who would have engaged an army to protect his family. But that family didn't exist anymore. That family died the moment they decided I was disposable. And if I paid the ransom, what then? The Russians would know I was a soft target. They would come back for the other 2 million. They would come back for the house. Once you pay the alligator, it doesn't leave. It just waits for you to get fat again. I made a decision. It was the coldest decision of my life, colder than the winter in Korea, colder than the grave they tried to dig for me. "Brandon," I said. "Yes." "Yes, Dad, tell me you are sending it. Who is this?" I asked. The silence on the other end was absolute. "What?" Brandon whispered. "Dad, it is me. Brandon, your son." "I don't have a son," I said, pitching my voice into the tremulous, confused register I had perfected over the last 48 hours. "My son is a good boy. He wouldn't yell at me. And I don't know anything about $2 million. That is a lot of money. Do we have that kind of money, Dad?" "Stop it," Brandon screamed. "Stop acting. This is real. They are going to kill her. I am an old man, Brandon," I continued, letting a note of senile irritation creep into my voice. "I am confused. You told the police I was confused. You told the doctors I was incompetent. You filed the papers, remember? You said I couldn't handle my own affairs." "No. I lied. I lied about all of it. You are fine. You are a genius. Just pay them." "I am sorry, sir," I said. "I don't know who you are. And I certainly don't remember my banking passwords. I think I lost that little notebook. You know, the one where I write everything down. I can't find it. Maybe I left it in Canada, Dad." "No, I can't help you," I said. "I am just a senile old man. I shouldn't be making financial decisions. It wouldn't be legal." I hung up the phone. I turned it off. I took the battery out. I rolled down the window and tossed the pieces into the wet gutter as we drove past. Jack Slater looked at me from the driver's seat. His face was unreadable in the shadows, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "That was cold," Wallace Jack said quietly. "It was justice, Jack," I replied. "They wanted me helpless. They wanted me incompetent. I just gave them exactly what they asked for." "But Monica," Jack started. "We are not leaving her to die," I said, reaching into my bag. "We are just not paying for her. I am not an ATM. I am a soldier, and we don't negotiate with terrorists." I pulled out my laptop. "I sent the video to your contact at the FBI," I said. "The metadata on that file is sloppy. They sent it from a burner, but they didn't route it through a VPN. They are arrogant." Jack glanced at me. "You want to track them? I don't want to track them," I said. "I want to end them." Brandon told the police I was dangerous. He told them I was armed. He told them I was a threat. I looked at the screen where the tracing software was already narrowing down the signal origin of the video file. It is time to prove him right. Hanging up on a man screaming for his life leaves a specific kind of silence in a car. It is heavy, thick, and suffocating. Jack Slater didn't say a word. He just kept driving his eyes, scanning the digital map on his laptop screen, where a small pulsing cursor had locked onto a signal. The Russians were sloppy. They were arrogant. They thought they were dealing with a frightened finance bro and a senile pensioner. They didn't bother bouncing their signal through enough nodes. Jack had them pinpointed to a defunct shipping terminal in the industrial district south of the city within 4 minutes of the video being sent. I didn't hang up on Brandon because I wanted Monica to die. I hung up because negotiation was over. It was time for extraction. But I wasn't going in with guns blazing. I am 70 years old. I don't kick down doors anymore. I open them for people who do. I directed Jack to a parking lot 3 miles from the target location. I opened my laptop and initiated a secure video call. Not to my son. To the Seattle field office of the FBI. I didn't have a contact there, but when you have a folder full of evidence proving an international money laundering ring is operating on U.S. soil, you get put through to the special agent in charge very quickly. I introduced myself. I didn't use the confused old man voice. I used the voice that briefed generals in logistics tents in the desert. I told them everything. I sent them the loan documents with the forged signatures. I sent them the audio of the extortion at the diner. I sent them the digital trail Jack had uncovered linking Viper Holdings to the fentanyl cash flow. They listened. They didn't interrupt. When I was finished, there was a silence on the line. Mr. King, the agent, said, his tone clipped and professional. "We have had Viper on our radar for 18 months. We have never been able to pin a location on their leadership. You are telling me you know where they are right now. I am telling you, I am going to drive right up to their front door in 20 minutes, I said. And they are going to let me in because they think I am bringing them $2 million. You are a civilian, the agent warned. We cannot authorize you to enter a hostage situation. I am not asking for authorization, I replied. I am giving you a window. I am the bait. They want me. They want my assets. If you want them, you will have a tactical team on my 6 o'clock. If you don't, I handle it my way. And my way involves a lot more paperwork for your coroner. I gave them the coordinates. I negotiated my terms. Full immunity for any traffic violations committed in the last 48 hours. Immediate expungement of the silver alert and the psychiatric hold record. And I wanted my son and daughter-in-law processed by the book. No deals. They agreed. They didn't have a choice. I was the only key to the lock. Now came the hard part. The logistics. The Russians wanted the money, but they also wanted the collateral. They wanted the Mustang. It was the symbol of their leverage. Brandon had told them I drove it to Canada. They knew it was gone. If I showed up in my wife's SUV, they might get suspicious. They might panic. But I am a logistics engineer. Impossible shipping requests are my specialty. When I mailed the tracker to Vancouver, I knew I might need the car back. I didn't just have Jim drive it around. I had him drive it to a private airfield. I paid $25,000 from my offshore account to charter a cargo transport plane. It was an exorbitant, ridiculous expense. It was the kind of waste that makes accountants weep. But in war, you spend what you must to secure the asset. The plane had touched down at a private strip south of Seattle an hour ago. Jim's contact had unloaded it and left it exactly where I asked. Jack drove me to the airstrip. There she was, my 1968 Ford Mustang, candy apple red, rain beating on the hood. She looked menacing under the floodlights. She wasn't just a car anymore. She was a weapon. I got out of Jack's sedan. "This is it, Wallace," Jack said. "You go in there, there is no guarantee they don't shoot you on sight, just for the sport of it." "They won't," I said, opening the driver's door. The smell of old leather and gasoline hit me. It smelled like home. They are greedy, Jack. Greed makes people predictable. They want the 2 million. They won't shoot the goose until they are sure it laid the golden egg. I climbed in. I put a large silver metal briefcase on the passenger seat. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. It looked like it contained $2 million in non-consecutive bills. I turned the key. The V8 engine roared to life, a deep guttural growl that vibrated in my chest. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, mechanical precision. I was a component in a machine now. I drove out of the airstrip and onto the dark, wet highway. I kept it at the speed limit. I saw black SUVs merging into traffic behind me, keeping their distance. The FBI was in play. I drove toward the industrial district. The warehouses here were skeletons of the shipping industry, rusted and hollow. I turned down a potholed service road, the Mustang's headlights cutting through the gloom. The location was a corrugated metal structure at the end of a dead end. A single light bulb burned above a loading dock door. I pulled up to the metal gate. It slid open electronically. They were expecting me. I drove into the courtyard. It was a kill box, high walls on 3 sides, no exit. I stopped the car. I left the engine running. I looked through the windshield. 3 men stood by the loading dock. They were dressed in cheap suits that bulged at the waistlines. Russian muscle. And in the center, kneeling on the wet asphalt, were Brandon and Monica. They looked broken. Monica was weeping silently, her makeup smeared into a Rorschach test of terror. Brandon looked like a man who had already died. His head was hung low, his shoulders shaking. When he heard the engine, he looked up. He saw the Mustang. He saw me. And for a second, I saw hope flare in his eyes. It was pathetic. He thought I was the cavalry. He thought I had capitulated. He thought his daddy had come to pay his debts and make the bad men go away. He scrambled to his feet, straining against the zip ties on his wrists. "Dad," he screamed, his voice cracking with relief. "You came, you brought it." One of the Russians stepped forward. He was big with a beard that looked like steel wool. He smiled, and it was a terrifying sight. "Mr. King," the Russian shouted over the rumble of the engine, "you are a hard man to invite to a party." I turned off the ignition. The silence rushed back in. I grabbed the silver briefcase. I opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I didn't look at my son with love. I didn't look at him with pity. I looked at him like a general looks at a soldier who fell asleep on watch and let the enemy into the camp. I walked toward them, the briefcase heavy in my hand. Brandon was sobbing now, blubbering thank yous, promising to pay me back, promising to be better. He had no idea. I wasn't there to save him. I was there to ensure that when the cage door slammed shut tonight, he was on the inside of it. I stopped 10 feet from the Russian. I held up the briefcase. "I brought what you asked for," I said, my voice steady as a rock. The Russian extended his hand. "Give it here." I looked at Brandon. I wanted him to see this. I wanted him to remember this moment for the next 15 years. "I am not giving it to you," I said. The Russian frowned. His hand went to his jacket. I placed the briefcase on the wet ground. I didn't slide it. I set it down with purpose. "I am giving it to them," I said. And then I popped the latches. The metal latches of the silver briefcase snapped open with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the wet, hollow silence of the shipyard. I did not rush. I kept my movements deliberate, precise, the way I had been trained to handle ordnance 40 years ago. The rain drummed against the aluminum casing, washing away the fingerprints I hadn't bothered to wipe off because I knew they wouldn't matter in 5 minutes. Brandon was panting, his eyes fixed on the case like a starving dog looking at a steak. He was already spending the money in his head. He was already imagining his freedom, thinking about how he would spin this story later, how he would tell his friends he survived a harrowing kidnapping. He thought the hard part was over. He thought his father had capitulated. The Russian leader, a man whose suit cost more than my first house, stepped closer. He didn't look at the case. He looked at me. He was checking for a wire, for a weapon, for fear. He found none of those things. He found only the blank, flat stare of a man who has accepted the inevitable. "Open it," the Russian commanded. I lifted the lid. The interior of the case was lined with black foam cut precisely to hold $2 million in stacked hundreds. But the foam was empty, save for a single object resting in the center. It was a small, black, rectangular box, a GPS tracker, identical to the one I had pulled off my Mustang 3 days ago. A red LED light on the side of the device was blinking rapidly. Pulse. 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 The Russian frowned. He looked at the box, then at me. His brain was trying to process the discrepancy. He expected green. He got black plastic. "What is this?" he growled, his hand moving toward the bulge under his jacket. "Where is the money?" Brandon leaned forward, squinting through the rain and the tears. "Dad, what is that? Where is the cash? You said you brought the cash." I looked at my son. I wanted him to understand. I wanted him to feel the floor drop out from under him one last time. "I didn't bring you a payoff, Brandon," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "I brought you a target." I reached down and picked up the tracker. I held it up so the Russian could see the blinking light. "You boys like tracking people, right?" I asked the mobster. "You like knowing where your assets are. You like using technology to intimidate old men. Well, I appreciate the lesson. I learned a lot from you." The Russian's eyes went wide. He realized a second too late what was happening. He spun around, shouting something in Russian to his men by the loading dock. "This beacon has been transmitting a high-priority distress signal on a federal frequency for the last 10 minutes, I said calmly. "I didn't send the location to my bank. I sent it to the Seattle FBI hostage rescue team, and I told them there was an armed cell holding civilians and a federal witness." Brandon screamed. It was a high, thin sound of pure terror. Dadno, the Russian pulled his gun. He raised it, aiming directly at my chest. He was going to kill me out of spite. He didn't care about the money anymore. He just wanted to erase the man who had tricked him. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at his watch. "You are late," I said. The world exploded in light. Floodlights, blindingly white and intense, erupted from the rooftops of the surrounding warehouses, turning the dark, rainy night into high noon. The sudden brilliance washed out everything, dazzling the Russians, blinding them. "Federal agents, drop the weapon." "Drop it now," the voice boomed from loudspeakers that seemed to come from the sky itself. It was the voice of God, amplified by tactical gear. At the same time, the metal gates of the shipyard crashed open. 2 armored Bearcat vehicles roared into the courtyard, tires screaming on the wet asphalt. Men in full tactical gear poured out of the backs, moving with the fluid, lethal grace of a wolf pack. The Russian hesitated. For a split second, his ego warred with his survival instinct. He swung the gun toward the incoming agents. Pop, pop. 2 shots rang out from a sniper position I couldn't see. The Russian's shoulder disintegrated in a spray of red mist. He dropped the gun and fell to his knees screaming. The other 2 thugs by the loading dock didn't even try. They threw their hands up, dropping to the pavement as red laser dots danced across their chests. Brandon and Monica were screaming, huddled together on the ground like children. They were trying to crawl away, trying to find cover behind the wheels of the Mustang. "Don't shoot," Brandon shrieked. "I am a victim. I am a hostage. Don't shoot me." I stood by the car, my hands raised slowly to shoulder height, palms open. I was calm. I knew the drill. I waited for the team to secure the perimeter. An agent rushed toward me, rifle lowered but ready. "Mr. King, that is me," I said. "Secure him," the agent yelled. They moved past me, swarming the Russians. They zip-tied them rough and efficient. Then they moved to the couple by the car. Brandon reached out to the nearest agent, grabbing his pant leg. "Thank God you are here. They were going to kill us. My father, he is crazy. He almost got us killed. Take them away." The agent looked down at Brandon. He didn't offer a hand up. He reached for his belt and pulled out a pair of flex cuffs. "Brandon King?" the agent asked. Yes, that is me." "Why, you are under arrest," the agent said, spinning Brandon around and forcing his face into a puddle. "What?" Brandon yelled, spitting dirty water. "No, I am the victim. They kidnapped my wife. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bank fraud, and money laundering," the agent recited, tightening the cuffs, until Brandon yelped. "And we have a warrant for Monica Vance for identity theft and elder abuse." Monica, who had been sobbing quietly, suddenly found her voice. "No. You can't arrest us. We called the police. We filed the report. He is the one who is crazy. Look at him. He drove a car to Canada and back." She pointed at me. I was standing 10 feet away, an agent patting me down for weapons. I looked at her. I didn't look crazy. I looked like a man who had just finished a very long, very difficult job. The agent hauled Monica to her feet. "Ma'am, we have the digital trail. We have the forged documents your husband gave to the loan sharks. And we have the testimony of a Mr. Jack Slater regarding your little nursing home scheme. You have the right to remain silent." They dragged them toward the armored trucks. Brandon was weeping, his expensive suit ruined, his dignity gone. He looked back at me over his shoulder. "Dad, tell them I am your son. Tell them I didn't mean it." I looked at him. The rain was washing the blood from the pavement where the Russian had fallen. I saw the boy I had raised, the teenager I had taught to drive in this very Mustang, but I also saw the man who had tried to lock me in a cage. I didn't say anything. I just watched. The agent who had secured me walked over. He was the special agent in charge I had spoken to on the video call. He looked at the scene, then at me. "You cut it close, Mr. King," he said. "Precision timing, Agent," I replied. "It is what I do." He looked at the Mustang. "Nice car. Shame about the trunk carpet." "I can fix the carpet," I said. "Some stains are harder to get out." They loaded Brandon and Monica into the back of the same transport van as the Russian mobsters. It was fitting. They were partners after all. They belonged together. As the doors slammed shut on my son's face, cutting off his pleas, I felt a weight lift off my chest. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was the heavy, exhausting relief of survival. I walked over to the Mustang. I ran my hand over the hood. It was cold and wet, but solid. It was still mine. I opened the door and retrieved the silver briefcase from the ground where I had dropped it. I closed it and tossed it into the passenger seat. The FBI agent watched me. "We are going to need a statement, Wallace." "I know," I said. "I will follow you to the station. But first I need to make a call." "Who are you calling?" "My travel agent," I said. "I think I am finally ready to take that trip to Canada. For real this time." I got into the car. The engine turned over with a roar that sounded like freedom. I put it in gear and followed the flashing lights out of the shipyard, leaving the wreckage of my family in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. There was nothing back there worth saving. The interrogation room at the Seattle precinct smelled of industrial cleaner and nervous sweat. I stood behind the one-way mirror, my arms crossed, watching the final act of my son's disintegration. Brandon sat at the metal table, his expensive suit ruined, his hands cuffed to the bar. He was weeping, but even now his tears were strategic. He was trying to sell the only commodity he had left: victimhood. He forced me, Brandon sobbed to the detectives, pointing a trembling finger at the empty chair where the Russian mobster had sat earlier. The Russian made me forge the signature. He said he would kill Monica if I didn't get the house. I did it for love. I am a victim here. The detective looked at the glass, meeting my eyes. He knew it was a lie. I knew it was a lie. But a jury might be swayed by a crying man claiming duress. Duress is a powerful defense. If he could prove he acted under the immediate threat of death, the fraud charges might not stick. He might walk away with probation. I couldn't let that happen. I opened the door and walked into the room. Brandon's head snapped up. "Dad." He breathed, his eyes lighting up with a desperate, pathetic hope. Tell them I had no choice." I didn't sit down. I walked to the table and placed a heavy manila envelope in front of the detective. "He is lying," I said, my voice filling the small room. "He wasn't forced to defraud me to save his wife. He started planning this 6 months ago." I opened the envelope. I laid out the evidence like a royal flush. First, the credit card statements showing the payments to the document forger, dated weeks before he ever met the Russians. Second, the emails between him and Monica discussing the Serenity Care facility. And then I played the audio. I took out my phone and connected it to the room's speaker system. The audio from the bug I had planted in his living room filled the air. It was the conversation from 3 nights ago, long before the kidnapping, long before the diner. "We make him really lose his mind," Brandon's voice said, clear and cold. "We switch his medications. We hide his things. In a month, any doctor will certify that he is mentally ill." Then Monica's voice. "And once he is committed, we have access to all his accounts. We can sell the house." I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. The detective looked at Brandon with pure disgust. "Duress does not work retroactively. You cannot claim you were forced to commit a crime today that you were already planning to commit last week." Brandon stopped crying. The hope vanished from his eyes, replaced by a hollow, dead realization. He looked at me, and for the first time he didn't see an ATM or a nuisance. He saw the man who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. "Why," he whispered. "Because you broke the code, Brandon," I said. "You don't leave your people behind, and you certainly don't sell them for parts." I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I had completed the mission. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but when they are greased with undeniable evidence, they crush everything in their path. The trial was short. Brandon's lawyer tried to argue entrapment, then insanity, then leniency. None of it worked. The forensic accounting trail Jack Slater had uncovered was a roadmap of greed. The judge was a stern woman who had no patience for elder abuse. She sentenced Brandon King to 15 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. He would be 53 years old when he saw the outside world again. Monica took a plea deal, turning on Brandon in the final hour to save herself, but her involvement was too deep. She received 8 years for identity theft and conspiracy. As the bailiff led them away, they didn't look at each other. They didn't look at me. They were just two broken people who had bet against the wrong man. With the legal battle over, I had one final logistical operation to complete. Liquidation. I returned to 42 Evergreen Terrace. The house was silent. It felt smaller than I remembered. It was just wood brick and drywall. The memories that lived there, the breakfasts with my late wife, the Christmas mornings, the baseball games in the yard, they had been tainted. Every room whispered of the betrayal. I called a real estate agent and told him to list it. I didn't care about top dollar. I wanted it gone. I sold it to a young couple with a baby on the way. I left them the furniture. I left them the tools in the garage. I walked out with a single suitcase. Then I went to the storage facility where I kept the Mustang. I stood in front of the car for a long time. It was beautiful. It was a masterpiece of engineering. But it was also the bait. It was the object that had almost cost me my life. I couldn't drive it anymore without seeing the Russian's blood on the pavement, or remembering my son's desperate, greedy eyes. I sold it to a collector in Japan for $85,000. I didn't feel sad as I watched it being loaded onto the transport truck. I felt lighter. I took the money from the house, the money from the car, and a portion of my investment portfolio, and I went shopping. But not for a condo, not for a retirement community. I bought a 45-foot Prevost motor coach. It was a rolling fortress of luxury equipped with satellite internet solar panels and a king-sized bed. It was a home that could move. It was freedom with a diesel engine. On the day I picked it up, I sat in the driver's seat looking at the endless array of gauges and screens. It felt like a cockpit. It felt right. I pulled my phone out one last time. I scrolled through the contacts until I found the name Tyler. Tyler was Brandon's son from his first marriage. He was 20 years old, a junior in college studying engineering. He was a good kid. He had stayed out of the drama, kept his head down, and worked 2 jobs to pay his tuition because his father never sent him a dime. I dialed the number. Grandpa Tyler's voice was surprised. I heard about Dad. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Tyler, I said. Your father made his choices. You are not your father. I know, Tyler said quietly. I just transferred $200,000 into your student account, I said. There was a silence on the line. A long, stunned silence. Grandpa, what? I can't take that. It is done, I said. That is your tuition. That is your grad school. That is your start in life. You don't have to work 2 jobs anymore. You just have to study. Grandpa, Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. You can thank me by doing one thing, I said, my voice hardening slightly. Do not be like him. Do not take shortcuts. Do not think the world owes you anything. You build your life, Tyler. You don't steal it. I promise, Tyler said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. I promise. Good. I am proud of you, kid. Where are you going? He asked. I am going fishing, I said. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I released the parking brake. The massive engine hummed beneath me, a deep, powerful vibration that signaled readiness. I pulled out of the dealership lot and turned onto Interstate 5 heading north. The rain had stopped. The sky over Seattle was clearing, revealing the jagged snow-capped peaks of the mountains in the distance. I wasn't running away anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was moving forward. I looked at the green highway sign approaching overhead. Vancouver, BC, 140 miles. I smiled. My friend Jim was expecting me. We had a fishing trip to plan, and this time I wasn't sending a decoy. I was going myself. I merged into the fast lane, set the cruise control, and watched the city fade into the rearview mirror. I had no house. I had no car. I had no son. But for the first time in 40 years, I was completely, undeniably free, and the road ahead was wide open. In the end, my son learned the hardest lesson of all. You cannot build a future by burning the bridge that carried you. He mistook my silence for senility and my generosity for weakness. He believed that sharing my blood gave him the right to bleed me dry. But he forgot that I spent a lifetime mastering the art of survival. True family is defined by loyalty, not entitlement. By trying to lock me away to cover his own sins, he only succeeded in constructing his own prison cell. I didn't just reclaim my assets. I reclaimed my dignity. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let the people who weigh you down sink on their own. If you believe that justice is best served, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of sweet revenge.